Plus, another meeting on congestion pricing is set to take place in Manhattan today. There are concerns and continued concerns about the controversial plan, which looks like it will take effect in May.
Well, some are blasting the MTA, saying officials are treating congestion pricing to fund the agency. Joining us right now, the Transport Workers Union International President John Samuelsen. Nice to have you back on Good Day New York.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So what do you think about congestion pricing?
We think congestion pricing is an absolutely marvelous tool to reduce congestion in the city. It would have been an incredible moment to drive behavioral change to get commuters out of their vehicles and onto public transit, but we don't think that it's going to have the effect that it would have had this been accompanied by massive increases in service, such as what happened in London and Singapore and elsewhere.
We just had the MTA chairman on, Jana Lieber, and I asked him about your concerns. In fact, we have a little bit of that interview. 1 second, it's coming.
A lot of this money is going into resiliency to protect against what we saw last Friday, because we have, 400 pumping facilities. We have a system that's really old that it wants to fall apart. When you put all that water and chemicals and salt in it over 100 years, you got to maintain this thing. It is the lifeblood of New York. That's part of the benefit. So
he said it's part of the benefit, the resiliency of the system. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, it's one of the few things he was right about. Absolutely, it's going to raise revenue, and that revenue can be invested into hardening the system, increasing the level of resiliency. But it should have been more than that. It should have been more. We all know it's going to raise revenue, right? That's one of my main criticisms. It will raise revenue, absolutely. But it should have raised revenue and reduced congestion in an overwhelming manner. And it's not going to happen because the disincentive of central business district tolling is not going to be accompanied by the incentive of folks getting out of their vehicles to get on new added service that's targeted for the folks that currently drive.
Do you think that could happen after the fact? Because once you do have those funds, you may be able to add more service. You may be able to add more lines.
No, because the funds that are raised by congestion pricing tolling are only to go to capital for investments such as investing in hardening and resiliency, line expansions, state of good repair work. They're not for service increases.
What about talking about the people that are getting exemptions for this? That has not been laid out yet, except the toll gantries. They are laid out and they are up and running. What do you think about the timing of that?
So I think the fact that I think it's easy to conclude that we're right, that this is more about raising revenue than it is about reducing congestion. The toll gantries alone are evidence of that, right? Because
they're all over the city.
They're all over the place.
And it's so interesting because the MTA takes such a long time to move, right? But those toll gantries are up.
We wish that they would have been so zealous in putting out targeted service increases to lure folks out of their vehicles and onto public transit. This should have been a transformative moment, and it's not.
So give us specifics what you would have liked to see happen.
Expanding the hours of Express Bus service from the outer boroughs. Right now, Express Bus service is very limited hours. Perhaps reducing the amount of the fare on Express Bus service. He talks about capacity within the subway system, doubling, tripling the amount of buses to get riders, commuters to the capacity.
What did you say, though? Because they are adding free services on some of the buses. Is that something that you think is great timing, especially now that they know that they need more money for capital projects?
I think that adding free service in the outer boroughs, one bus in the outer boroughs, is an excellent pilot program. And I'm of the opinion, not in a haphazard way, but I'm of the opinion that ultimately to drive people onto public transit, that we should be steadily reducing the fare in a responsible way, figuring out a replacement for the funds, not to do it recklessly, but ultimately people will get on public transit if it's reliable, safe, and affordable.
So, when we hear about congestion pricing, we're always comparing it to London, or at least that's what they're telling us. But is there any comparison?
Yeah, I mean, just on the congestion pricing alone, I know that the chair of the MTA, Jana Lieber, said that accompanying the rollout of congestion pricing that London only increased the bus service by 3%. This is absolutely false. London put such a massive emphasis on increasing service to lure commuters out of their vehicles and onto public transit. 300 buses was a 17% or more increase in service. And that is substantial in a targeted way. Imagine if we put 300 buses alone in New York or even more if we increased it by 17% in a targeted manner into the fringes of the outer boroughs where folks currently drive. Right now, there's really no incentive to go along with the disincentive of the tolling. So anybody who can afford to come is still going to come. They're not going to swap out their vehicle commute right now. That might take them 35, 40 minutes for a 2-hour slog on a bus to the subway. Well, despite his protestations about the amount of capacity.
I would say they might pick that option when they are forced with paying 15 to 23. We don't know the number yet of what that's going to cost.
Right. So I would say that the working New Yorkers that cannot afford it are going to be forced onto this slog that I spoke about with no targeted service increases, and the New Yorkers that can afford it are they're going to drive and they're going to pay the fee, which is why it's not going to reduce congestion the way it should have been. It won't be the transformative moment that it could have been.
So before we go, I just want to ask about your workers. Are they okay? I know, when Janet Lieber was here, said crime is definitely doing better in the subways. It's down in the subways. Why are you smiling? So do you see a difference? Do your people see a difference on the subway? Is it safer?
So when we talk about transit workers in New York City, and in fact in cities across the country, right? Because I run the national union, I represent New York and transit cities all over the country. There's a scourge of assaults against transit workers, and in the mind of a transit worker who goes to work every day, it's still a brutal workplace to come to work in every day. So even if the stats show that crime is being reduced, and I'm not going to argue with stats or data, but transit workers that get behind the wheel of a bus or conductors that are on our trains are still going to work with a high amount of anxiety about facing an assault each day.
Well, we wish them well, and we thank them for helping us get through Friday and every day, right? John Samuelsen, always great to talk to you. Transport Workers Union International President. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on.